Um, on behalf of Arrow, we'd just like to thank you for all being here today again. We've titled our conference this year, Catching Up and Looking Ahead, because we want to do just that, give our community a chance to check in on topics that are important to us and then catch up and connect with each other. This is for Arrow's first virtual conference, so thank you for your patience. And please let us know if you have any issues. We're happy to help with tech support and whatnot. Expo is free this year, so please send the links to anyone that you know. We would love for everyone who could possibly attend to do so. But if you would like to help sponsor the event, you can make a donation at arrowmt.org/donate, and we would really appreciate that. So getting into tonight's session, let me start by introducing Cole, our presenter tonight. So Mannix Ranch is a 5th generation cattle ranch raising 100% grass-fed and finished beef in Montana's Blackfoot Valley. In addition to his collaborations on the ranch, Cole has also worked with Western Landowners Alliance, the Heart of the Rockies Initiative, and the Property and Environment Research Center. He will be lobbying on behalf of Grow Montana in the 2021 legislative session. So Cole, thank you for being with us tonight. Before we get started here, is everyone pretty familiar with how Zoom works, or do we need to do a little review session for people? Are we all good? Okay. So can we just have everyone real quick in the chat, please write your name and your whoever you're affiliated with, just so we can kind of get to know each other a little bit and see who's here. And then Cole, whenever you're ready, if you want to introduce yourself and get going, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Can you share just a little bit with me about, are you looking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then discussion, or are you looking for a couple minutes and discussion?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, just whatever you want to say, really. We're kind of hoping for a discussion here, but if you could just give whatever background you want to give, and then we can start asking questions and getting more into conversation.
Sure. And we have till 6:15, is that right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
And the focus really is about the impact of 2020 in some way and how that's impacting your choices moving forward, and a little bit about if you had to pivot, just how was this year different from other years?
Okay. So thank you for having me. And I understand this is a happy hour.
That's right.
So
Here we go.
Raise a glass to you. Yeah. I'm based in Helena, and I'm part of my family, my mom and dad, and my siblings. I have 3 siblings on the ranch. My dad and mom, my dad has 2 brothers and spouses, and those spouses, and those other 2 couples have kids that are also on the ranch. And so I'm actually the city boy. I'm not employed by the ranch, but I'm involved in our succession planning. I very much care about the operation long term. My house in Helena is a beef pickup point for some of our direct customers. My wife and I are out at the ranch with our 2 young kids often, and may eventually be there full time. But essentially the Mannix family operation is dad and his 2 brothers and their spouses and their kids, and I'm the oldest of those kids, part of the 5th generation. And so we have a small beef program called Mannix Beef, and it's grass finished. It's been around now for, I think, about 15 years. And we raise about 1,200 mother cows. 90% still of what we do is sold commodity. So those calves are sold in the fall to feedlots, to growers, and we retain as much as we feel we can sell locally, and that ends up being maybe about 100, between 120 and 150 finished carcasses, where, you know, those animals are anywhere between 24 and 30 months of age when they're done. And then let's say another 40 cull cows worth of ground beef. And then our primarily a couple of grocery stores have been our best customers. The Good Food store by far is our largest, which will accept, you know, depending on the season, 3 to 5 carcasses per month, broken into primals and delivered, you know, in those primals to them. And then we process at Superior Meats, which is a state inspected facility in Western Montana. Used to process at Lolo Locker, have processed at White's and Ronan before, and Ranchland and Butte. But our longest term relationship is with Jerry at Superior Meats. And my brother Logan runs the beef program. But the family's involved, you know, in a lot of different members of the family are driving the route. So one of the things that COVID has changed is that we drive a direct to customer route from Helmville up to Bozeman and back through Butte, up through Helena to Bozeman, back through Butte. And then we drive another route up through Missoula and up into the Flathead and back. And that has been, you know, one of the, because of an increased demand from direct customers, that's been something that we've more recently changed. I would say that, you know, right now we have plenty of supply and we actually have plenty of demand. We have far more people that are coming to the website, and we're sold out for the most part. And it's really because of a processing bottleneck at the moment. We're booked out through through the end of the year, and people that order from us now, most of them are looking at, you know, January, February, March at the soonest to get their products. So it's been certainly a short-term challenge. We do the Sealy Lake and Missoula farmers markets. This has been the first year in 15 that those are profitable for us. You know, generally they are an economic loss, but a relationship builder for direct sales. And, you know, different members of the family will work our stand at the farmers market and get to know customers and just hear their thoughts and feedback and questions. And so it's really been an interface more than anything, an in-person interface, but a challenge to make it profitable. So that's kind of the outline of the families program. We sell maybe 40 head per year because, you know, we want to have a little bit more than we know we can sell locally. And it's hard to know how many to have in the pipeline, right? It takes time to finish out these animals. And so we usually sell a wholesale, let's say 40, a semi-load of finished carcasses to an established program, let's say Thousand Hills or US Wellness are good examples of programs that we'll market to, Strauss Meats. And by and large, we sell, the prices that you can sell to programs like that are below break even for us, meaning below break even with our opportunity cost of selling those animals as calves and never having gone to the work of, you know, adding the additional time and labor to finish them out as so let's say we sort of feel like if we can't sell wholesale carcasses for at least $265 a hot carcass weight, it's probably better that we sell our calves on the commodity market rather than bringing the animals to full finish. And it's probably, to be honest, it's probably closer to, if we were to convert more of our program to that grass finish model, and I think folks that are in a similar sort of scale operation that we found ourselves in, that are running similar programs, the $2.85 to $3 range is really more realistic in order to grow beyond the size that we, you know, are currently doing. And over the years, I've got to know some of you on the call, Madison and Jan. Jan, you know, has been super helpful over the years in understanding processing and some of my questions as we've got to know each other in different capacities. So anyway, that's a quick overview of the family program. I'll just say a couple more pieces of background. For 5 years, from 2012 to 2016, my family and a group of 120 other ranches, roughly, tried to form a larger co-op in the West to market grass finished beef. And I went to work for them as basically straight out of grad school in 12. And we tried at a larger scale with that supply chain to create more of a regional national brand called Ranchers Original. And we were aggregating cull cows and bulls that were pasture animals and didn't have hormones, to speak of growth hormones. We were trying to use lean domestic grass finished meat and a supply chain of that to reach, to basically be a domestic product that was at the lower end of the grass fed supply chain. And, our premise was that if we could move a certain amount of trim and lean meats at break even from cull cows, we could grow into the production model that a lot of ranchers were still a fairly steep learning curve to, to go away from what they knew, which was finishing calf or, selling calves in the fall, to a full-on finished production model. So we began that brand. We, as I said, we formed a co-op. We processed in Greeley. I would pick up semi-loads of cattle in Montana, which Wyoming. We had members. We never got it running, but we had members in the Dakotas and Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas that would have eventually participated if we would have grown large enough. But we would take loads of cattle in Montana and Wyoming and process in Greeley at a facility that was about 250 head per day. And we could get our processing costs low enough that way. It's still a small facility by industry standards, but we could get our processing costs low enough, as low as possible at our scale. And I think the major thing that happened with that idea was that cool legislation in 2015, it really just did not allow our domestic grass finished product to be the lowest price option for folks that would buy in that kind of volume. We found that imports were, about $1 per raw pound of meat on average cheaper, or more. And then there was some other challenges too. Processing in Greeley was always a bit of a challenge because you're operating at such a distance from the ranches, and it's a less, you have less touch with your product, and so you're processing kind of way away, and then you're storing that meat in a warehouse somewhere, and it's really hard to control the quality very well. You're sort of like a small niche program operating in a low quality way because you're not the person in the plant, you're not the one packing boxes. And there was very low touch with customers. Our customers had been like institutional markets who were a group called Thomas Cuisine Management supplied, the sort of like Sodexo supplied food services to hospitals and that sort of thing. There was another group called Hillary's Eat Well out of Kansas that would buy semi-loads of trim, and they were making an omnivore burger. So they were a veggie burger company, but they had like a sweet potato, flax, and grass-fed ground beef combination product. And that the woman who owned that company ended up losing the majority share of her ownership. The board discontinued that product. So there's a few kind of major. The packer that we were working with in Greeley had a heart attack and passed away. Had to sell the grinding facility that we were depending on. So there was a lot of challenges there, but it was a foray that part of my background, just a foray into a bit more scale than our small Mannix program. And then I'd just say over the years, I worked for Western Landowners Alliance for most of the past 4 years. And we did quite a bit of work to try to get, smallish, mid-size programs together to talk about lessons learned on the beef side. And so everything from Jay Barrell and the Yellowstone grass finished beef folks to, and let's say they would have been at a scale of 400 or 500 animals a year, bigger than my family by a ways, but still small. Corey Carmen has Carmen Ranch Direct out of Wallowa, Oregon. She participated in a lot of those discussions. She's at a different kind of a scale, like a couple thousand head a year. She's now bringing a lot of cattle out of Montana. It was Teton Waters, a few of these kind of mid-sized brands. And so we would bring people together to discuss lessons learned. And I'm participating in the Niche Meat Processors Network Meat School, trying to follow along in that as best I can. And it's still a really hard game to get into. It's really, our families program grew to its current size almost within 2 or 3 years, and we've been mostly kind of flat since then. We gain a few customers each year, but the growth is incredibly slow. And then today, I work as a consultant in agriculture and conservation as of the last few months. I'll be a lobbyist in the session for Grow Montana Policy Coalition, a soil health study bill, also for double snap and looking at some of the other issues that the Grow Montana Coalition cares about. And then I'm also working with a group called Heart of the Rockies, which is an umbrella group for land trusts in the area between the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Bitterroot Selway. And they also do a lot of stewardship type work on the wildlife side, where working lands and ranches are trying to be profitable and yet, manage the real impacts that wildlife have on their operation. So that's kind of just some background on, I'm working with some friends right now, trying to start a new venture, which would be a meat company that's reimagined based on our learning experience of basically it not working. And so that's what I'm doing in my spare time on the edges of the day is working on that new idea. So I definitely care about this topic like we all do on the call, and would love to start a discussion, see where people have been, what's interesting to them in this space.
Since I could chime in, I guess, Cole, I'm Ken Kaling. I don't know where you live in Helena. I live on Ewing, maybe your neighbor, 2 blocks north of the cathedral. My wife and I have a website, goodfoodworld.com, and we've been reporting on small ranchers and farmers for about 12 years. And you might look at that to see kind of the progress we've made. We fought issues more than once, political issues. I had a heart attack this last spring, and then we're stuck with the virus. But I sure would like to make an appointment to talk to you when we get clear of some of this stuff, because my background's, I'm new to cows, but Terrell Hibbert is my landlord. And I'm very interested in livestock managing environment, grasslands and others. I think there's some real avenues with some new politics in that area. I have a background in ecology and botany. And so I'm really, I guess I'm more interested in other people on the panel right now from educating me. But since you brought it up and you're actually going to be lobbying with the legislature, I'd really like to keep track with you on that. Okay.
That sounds great. Yeah.
So I'm going to be sure and get your telephone number and stuff.
I'll drop my contact information in the chat for anybody that we can continue the conversation.
Ken Cole, can you hear me? This is Jan Tusick.
Yeah. Hi, Jan.
How you doing?
Great.
Oh, it's nice. It's always nice to hear your story. And I'm just really intrigued because as a Farmers Union board member, I'm sure you're aware of Farmers Union's next kind of a new venture that Walter Schweitzer is leading. And I think it's going to be really important that we connect you with that steering committee and Walter, and you really share some lessons learned and how this cooperative can learn from that, and lay a path that has some hope of success. It's with the mobile unit. I think what's really important is gosh, we really got to test one of these units, I mean, they have been a model out there in a lot of different areas, and Montana has yet, besides the chicken unit attempt, has yet to really, really test it and see how it actually would work in rural communities. So I don't know if you've connected with Walter yet or we're planning to, but I'm going to give a big, we need Cole to come talk and join us.
Walter did call last week, and we visited about it, and
Good.
sounds like they'll be taking delivery on the unit that they purchased from Mike Calicrate here soon.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding was that it'll be located in Havre and hopefully operate along with that educational program for new meat cutters that they're trying to develop. And, essentially what Walter is saying is he doesn't have a super sharp pencil yet about what the cost will be on the slaughter, but, that one of the things we really need is to find where to cut this meat.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And I think another really important piece is that, those cooperative members, the way I have heard it being kind of proposed is those members would market their own meat. So for this cooperative to be successful, those members need end markets, and they need to identify those end markets so that they go in and they have a place to go with their meat. And as well as I do, that's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, we worked for years with Montana Natural Beef, and it just was, that market piece is critical. And I think you have some really good understanding of that they're going to need to have a deeper understanding of.
I've got two little boys that are they run like a herd across the ceiling above me just every few minutes. So if I get too loud, I'll try to get on mute. Yeah, Jan, it's a really important question about the market. And I see that Corey Carmen, who built her brand, let's say the first 1,000 head on Portland and Seattle grocery and restaurant, I see now that it's become Carmen Ranch Direct, and there is now an increasing focus, that she's trying to bring to direct to consumer markets. And I think that, to me, in Montana, that's going to have to be the near-term progress that we make. It's really hard to reach grocery and restaurant and work through the distributors through the regular channel. The folks that I think have most chance of success at growing something and scaling something, or just maintaining something that's pretty small, is strong direct-to-customer relationships. The same policy challenges that we faced, when I worked for this co-op, have only gotten harder since then, in terms of just big structural forces, right? So the market is critical. I also served on an advisory committee when One Montana did a meat processing feasibility study. The question that happened, I think, in 2016. They spent $120,000 on that study. It was pretty involved. There was a branding arm of it that Mercury Consulting did out of Bozeman, and then there was a second arm, which was the physical plant and design of the whole thing. And the concept was, could Montana support a 500 head per day facility? So much bigger than anything we have right now. And
Right.
And basically the moral of that story, the outcome was, it'd be a pretty marginal at 500 head per day. You're looking at something like a $70 million investment. And even at niche prices for that scale, the math didn't look good. It looked pretty marginal. It looked possibly profitable once you got fully up to close to capacity. But it's not, again, the key question there was, is the Montana brand strong enough to demand, to really just differentiate the products that would be processed at that plant from others? So far, in my experience, organic meats have held their differentiation, but natural, grass finished, things that are like animal welfare certified, GAP certified, third-party certifications that they kind of wax and wane in terms of whether they'll provide a premium in a given year. But organic has been the only sort of label that truly allows you to sell at a higher price point. And the challenge is most ranches have not been willing to sort of, meet that scale of production for organic. Many feel that it's impractical, including, frankly, my own family. I mean, we've had discussions over the years because it certainly aligns with our values, but we've never been able to get it over the hurdle as a family of how will we manage these public leased timberlands that have such a legacy of noxious weeds challenges, and how will we make organic fit kind of the unique challenges of this public-private, combined operation that we run in. So that the market question is still the most important one. And we are absolutely experiencing a processing bottleneck, but that has only been true during COVID.
Mhm.
A year ago, I wouldn't have been saying the same thing to you. I would have been saying mostly we just don't have enough market to grow our program. And so marketing part comes first and then the processing bottleneck for me, for my take. But
Yeah, I do think, we did that feasibility study years ago, but it still kind of came up with the picture of, you either really differentiate such an organic, standard, or, you're going to have a real challenge to, move your meat. So can we talk about cool? I mean, I think there's a real opportunity here to kind of have a, discussion about how these, national policies are. I know if Walter on this call, he'd be really taking the stage because he feels pretty strongly about it. But how cool is really, we just had a lamb plant shut down out of Colorado that, was one of the biggest, processing plants for lamb. And it was a Brazilian company that came in and they basically processed beef there. And it's Brazilian, a lot of it's Brazilian beef. So, but it's on the market as meat. I mean, USDA doesn't want to differentiate it.
May I break in for a second? I followed the Northern Plains Resource Council's 2-day meeting, and they had one person on there. I was looking for his name here and I don't have it, but he rapped for about 40 minutes on that subject, and he just went through the whole gamut. He seemed very, very intelligent, and I haven't had a chance to follow up with him, but he just, from subsidies to you name it, with Cargill and all the big players and the rest of it. And he talked to the effect that we absolutely have to get organized to I won't say the words, but fight these, what's. What do you think about that? I mean, the many and one impediments that ranchers have had to deal with from the beginning, but especially now with a national politic that seems to be allowing these foreign companies to come in. Did you hear me? I don't know.
I did. Yeah, I just wanted to make
Sure.
See if others wanted to respond to.
Probably too much to cover, way too much. But in a nutshell, what about cool?
Well, to be honest, my energy on it, on cool, is low. Not because it's not important, but because we seem so far off from it. I don't have much sense of how the Biden administration will be, will think about that, but it's not automatic for me that, that first of all, what will they actually be able to get done? How effective will they be? But even second of all, is that important?
Mhm.
to them. I mean, the Democrats certainly have been, starting with Clinton, very much about free trade and and that, the same interests that don't want to see the inefficiency that cool would bring to the large packers are strong as ever. And so I don't know. I'm not super knowledgeable about the cool Montana discussion, the sort of the state level cool and what I know that that's been something that Grow Montana, I think, has been involved in the past, and Northern Plains. I'm not sure its potential to like have a real impact just at the state level. I'd be interested if other folks have thoughts about sort of the local cool. But I guess the last thing I'd say about the federal cool is when I listened recently to Mike Calicrate present during a call that Jamie Ryan Lockman has been hosting, the Montana Organic Association on meats. Those calls have been happening, I think, monthly. And Mike presented, this is maybe a month or two ago. Mm-hmm. And he's he's an interesting person, and I think it can be challenging, but he is a bulldog. And my take is that he's ready to fight by creating small regional viable businesses on the entrepreneurial end, and is not quite sure where to go on policy at the moment. And personally, that's sort of where I'm at, where my energy is at, is like, man, this policy thing is hard. We can't give up. It matters, like, long term. And I know Mike wouldn't give up, and I don't think any of us would want to give up, but I want to create, even if it's really small, things that are viable, businesses that are viable. We've got some processing infrastructure that's going to come online here, let's say in a year, that money that the state spent to increase our capacity. How do we prepare to make sure that that doesn't go to waste with basically having inspectors in the budget, state inspectors, really doubling down on whatever people in this state can teach meat processing right now, getting them teaching people. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I'm ready to go to work cutting meat right now. Just learn, go find somebody who knows and spend my days learning how to do practical things rather than computer skills. So that's I don't know, that's kind of where it's not Janet and and Ken, it's not, definitely not that I don't think federal cool is important. It's just more where my personal energy's at.
Cole, this is Robin. Are you familiar with Gabe Brown's brand Nourished by Nature out of North Dakota? I'm just curious about, and I don't know his scale versus, your family scale and some of these cooperative scales or other regional scales you're talking about. But I was struck when you were talking about, the high touch, low touch customer. That seemed to be my takeaway from listening to you, is the higher the touch, the more valuable your connection with the customer is, and then the higher value you can charge for your beef, or something in there. I'm not using the correct language, but I'm just curious if what of the processes that he does or his business does do you think reasonably might be useful in a Montana context? Because I hear you when you say, managing the it just feels like an impossibly large boat to turn around to deal with the federal stuff. And so I'm just curious about if there's anything to share from that model that might be useful, in this reimagining that you're working on, or how to effectively manage that high touch without it requiring you to run around the state, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to say, like, I've visited Gabe Brown's place and toured some of what they're doing, and I've heard him speak a lot. I'm not as familiar with his brand and how they've built, the processing and marketing. The enterprise stacking that they do on an operational level is incredibly appealing. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, our family and colleagues talk about all the time. How do we do that? It makes so much sense for parasite reasons, for just, the diversity of species can have so many different benefits, but just, more livestock on the same land that complement one another ecologically and allow more revenue, that makes a lot of sense. But frankly, if we had, 10,000 laying hens or 5,000, I don't know, we've got to have a big enough direct to consumer market to be able to kind of begin. And we, there's such a chicken or the egg, not to confuse my, but right now we are really struggling just to control whether the right beef products are in the box at Superior.
Oh, wow.
It's literally a question of, Jerry is a great guy, and yet most of the stuff is still they're still on a napkin. Like literally they weren't scheduling out past February because they ran out of lines on their paper.
Okay.
So like there's a real gap in terms of our, just our overall sophistication in the infrastructure we have. And one thing, for example, that would incredibly help, I've done some pretty serious looking into a Friesla outfit. So the unit that Farmers Union's buying, Calicrate built it. There's another unit, Mobile Slaughter. It's in Wilsall right now. Matt Skoglund owns it. He's got Bridger Bison. He bought that from a company called Trivan. It's 20 years old. Trivan became Friesla. And Friesla, the company, started in 2019, they build, they've been around building these things, but now they're full on a company just dedicated to this modular processing, not just mobile, but basically they're units that snap together from the slaughter component to the drip cooler, aging cooler, to the cut and wrap unit, to the finished goods cooler. And they're built to be USDA inspector ready. And so I'm sorry, I'm losing this a little bit, but I guess my point was, right now, the unit that Matt has and the unit that Farmers Union have, and there's one more now in the state, another Trivan outfit that Nicole Wines recently purchased. I went up to look at it a few months ago in Lewistown. I'm not sure where it's sitting right now, but we've got 3 mobile units right now in the state, but nowhere to cut the meat still. And no real labor force that we know of that is ready to go to operate those units. So there's a real gap between where we actually are and where we even the next step. But to add on, like, how should we be spending the state money we just got? Friesla has it's called a VistaTrack system, and it's literally just the technology of the carcass goes over a rail and there's a digital scale, and that feeds into a readout on a computer screen, and that helps it's just basic inventory management that's digital. Even modifying our existing plants with that and helping employees understand how to use it would be a huge advance from where we're at now. But okay, then back to the Friesla question. So at $1.5 million, a Friesla investment in the whole 9 yards, the slaughter component, the aging cooler, the cut and wrap, and the finished goods, it can do 75 head per week. And what's kind of cool about it is that it can, you just snap together more of the same modular units and you get from 75 to 150 to 225. But the real key is, can you get to 75? By my math, it takes about 35 head a week if you're charging between 650 and 700 total dollars to break even. And you're operating a 7 or 8 man crew at that rate. And it's pretty hard if you add up the largest local Montana beef programs to get to 35 head a week.
Oh, wow.
You can find like 2 or 3 a week here, 2 or 3 a week there, 4 or 5 a week there. And then you're like a quarter of an animal a week, a half of an animal a week, so you end up having to really put really small scale together. And if you can't get to 35 head a week, you're not going to be able to be profitable in a unit like that.
I see.
And so, one of the questions I'm trying to get at this gap, I went to Corey Carmen and I said, Corey, you got 2,000 head in your program, and by the end of next year, she plans to be buying a semi-load a week out of Montana of finished grass-fed beef. So I said, Corey, rather than shipping those out of state live and you process them in Idaho and Oregon, what if we process them here for you? Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of thing where she totally is right on line with that value set, right? She's on the board, I think, of Niche Meat Processors Association. She wants that to work, but she's like, look, I've got to have cheaper processing by 150, 200 bucks a head than you can afford. So I've got to charge on that Friesli unit 650 to 700 per head on 35 head a week. And she brings that many out per week of Montana, but she can only pay, given her other options, maybe 500 gross per carcass. So we're like $150 to $200 per carcass off having Montana processing competitive with the kind of scale operation she's dealing with. I know I'm rambling here, so I apologize, but I'm just trying to give like a sense of.
So Cole, I have a question. This is Jan.
Yeah.
So in that cost structure,
Yeah.
What are the key differences between their costing and Montana costing? Is it the labor? Is it the offal? Where's the pinpoint?
So she's at a level where she can get in with the big packers, right?
Okay.
And basically, they don't have to communicate with 10 people to get a semi-load of cattle to get in, right? They can schedule, and she can bring them volume consistently, and they don't have to like slow down their operations or communicate with a whole bunch of little customers. And so you're talking about facilities that are 500 head per day to 1,000, 1,500 head per day.
Okay.
Like it's a real. I visited a plant over in her neck of the woods in Toppenish, Washington, where Country Natural Beef processes. And to give an example, so Country Natural Beef, they are processing 500 to 600 a week. It's owned by a co-op of 70 to 80 ranchers. And they have their own brand that they sell in Whole Foods and Burgerville and grocery stores. And those guys are just barely big enough at 500 to 600 head per week that Toppenish will allow them to process. And it's because they don't want to mess with a scale that's less than that. So really, Corey's ability to process is just built on the scale of facilities that she has available to her in Oregon and in the Magic Valley in Idaho, Twin Falls area.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There's some, we could talk all night, but there's some, you hit on some things that are in a breath. We look at clean operations with people that are paid decently and safe environments and the rest of it. The meat business as a whole is not that. And we all know that. We all know that it's true. Now, I've met some of those people in Oregon. They've got connections in Hawaii, There's a whole lot of skullduggery that makes that price competitive. And I think we're moving very dynamically now with the virus. We got climate change, and what's right ahead of us right now is that we've got to figure out a new way to survive, not just sell beef. And we're only going to do that by bringing it back home and working from the grassroots again in the base, and getting it in the consumer's mind that they're doing something really special here, to get off the treadmill of the big producers and get more people out to the farms, get whatever we have to do. I mean, Gail and I have devoted 12 years to trying to do that for small producers. So I'm really, really big on this. I mean, since the WTO demonstrations in Seattle in '99, where I was standing next to people and everybody was shouting, I got the message. And from that day to this day, I don't believe in anything big, period. I don't believe in corporations. We're destroying the earth. We brought on climate change, and this pandemic is even part of that. So we take it from there, I guess, you know. If we can get together and make what you're talking about work with smaller projects, I was going to ask you about, there's enough time, but I was going to ask you about management in the co-ops and in the stores. I know a couple that I won't mention that I think the management of selling the beef is pathetic and could vastly be improved, you know, that more people would eat meat and cross the line if they really knew the full story about nutrition and everything else. It's not really being brought to them. So that's my preaching today. But you hit on some stuff that's really, really touchy for me, you know. I do think we've got to bring food back home. For your
Thank you, Ken.
patience.
Cole, I have a quick question. I know we're running out, but just how does at this 35 head a week, you know, $650 to $700 for the processing people, how does that translate to the price per beef? And I guess it depends on the cut, but you know, for you, let's say if it's your animal, like how does that translate to the price that the customer then has to pay so that it, you know, it all is profitable for everybody?
So I'll give this example. If I buy a hot carcass from my family at the rate that they feel like they could keep producing it for that, and they'd actually transfer the rest of their production over to that local model. Let's say that's $3 a hot carcass weight. And then if I were to add the, you know, the freight involved and the $100 to $125 slaughter fee plus cut and wrap, you know, and I'm taking slaughter and cut and wrap total cost in that $700 range. Then divide that cost out over a carcass, and it's about $7.25 a pound. You know, and so your average cost of meat, if you take it across the high end stuff and the ground beef, and that's not including, that's basically making the assumption that I don't necessarily have a market for offal. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily have a market for bone. Now that's not always true, right? I can get more value by finding markets for those pieces. I can get more value by smoking and doing value added products, but I'm just saying, divide the total cost by the fresh meat and you're in that $7.25 range. It's not unattainable for folks if they're willing to buy in bulk. And I mean, that's one of the changes we've seen in COVID. So what Walter Schweitzer is saying and what, you know, is, look, the demand that increased based on COVID was demand that people who are finding an animal from their neighbor and filling a freezer. And a lot of them bought a freezer for the first time. And so at least they have that. and that, if nothing else, will need to be filled again. And so it's a certain amount of hope that perhaps it opened up a new space for a local market in Montana. And people may be buying local for very different reasons. It may not be so much ecological. Some will be that, right? It may be not so much health benefits, although some will be that. It's security, you know, for folks. And so I think that the opportunity that does exist is based on just people seeing how a shock, I don't want to make light of COVID, but it's sort of minor compared to shocks, you know, that we might experience down the road. And so the point is, like, we realizing how fragile the whole thing is. And that's the opportunity if to find folks who want more resiliency, more certainty locally, and relationships they can see and people that they know and can shake hands with. Like that is the opportunity. I've asked Mike Calicrate and I asked Rebecca Thistlethwaite, who runs Niche Meat Processors. I said, what have you seen? You know, we in Montana, we saw a spike when COVID happened, and we're still experiencing the spike. And Mike and Rebecca both said, man, our people, it spiked, but now it's back to normal. People return to their habits. and Walter, basically said, well, it might just be that their freezer's full. And that's possible, right? But it's probably a mix. Like, I think there's reason for caution, because we don't know how much that the new demand that COVID has created will last. Our family's really wondering about that, because we're investing in a reefer trailer that we can better use to deliver on our route. And we don't really know whether that reefer trailer will be needed in 6-8 months, a year, whatever. We're going on faith, and we want it to happen. And so we're making the investment. But there's some significant uncertainty in how lasting is this demand. And Rebecca, it's interesting. I mean, Rebecca, she's teaching this meat school, the Western Meat School. She wrote a book that is part of it's the textbook. I think it's called Modern Livestock Farm or something like that. And she told me, she's like, don't invest in processing first. I know everybody's talking about processing right now, but that's a fool's errand. Don't do it. Focus on building a market. Mm-hmm. And so she's saying, look, I understand the urgency. And Corey Carmen told me the same thing. She's like, I understand why people want this right now, but she said, with all my heart, don't do it. So I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do. It may be to invest in processing. Sometimes there is an element of build it and they will come. And sometimes you just have to start something and take a risk. But it's not easy. And people like Corey, people like Rebecca, people like Mike are saying, go in with your eyes wide open. We're not sure how consistent the COVID changes will be, how lasting they'll be. And this isn't easy no matter what you do. And so I really believe I would rather build relationships in as close a possible radius as possible to where the ranches are. Mm-hmm. I just think it's more certainty long term. It's going to be less people that just read the latest report from Eat Lancet and say, oh, beef is bad for the world and the environment, etc. It's going to be more people that you actually can have a dialogue with and ask their perspective and address as best you can their concerns and learn yourself. And it's those kind of solid market relationships where if a business could build a direct to consumer pool of customers of 1,000 to 3,000 people in Montana. Let me say this, 3,000 to 5,000 Montanans. That's my rough math on what it would take to operate a beef business at a scale that could buy a freezeless system and keep it profitable. 3,000 to 5,000 direct customers who knew and trusted the brand, and it wasn't just a website to them, but it was a good quality product, and they could get it consistent. They could order it relatively easily and conveniently. The price would not be such a barrier. It would need to be delivered. It would need to be a convenient enough process compared to the easy Amazon button that they would do it. So
I think it's time. I mean, the house next to me all of a sudden has a sale sign on it. It's a little 1942 house, nothing special at all, $350,000. When I looked at houses here 10, 15 years ago, I could have bought 3 of them or 4 of them for that. And the way Bozeman is growing and whatever, I think one thing that is happening is people who are coming in are better educated, more informative. And I believe, my wife is a marketing person and I'm not, but I believe that you really hit on it, that there's a market, there's a tremendous market for local food. Maybe I won't see it, but you will, for sure. And people in the country have to go somewhere, and the cities are full, and Montanans still want to come out here to get away from people, should go somewhere else. Maybe South America. I don't know, but I think that resource management is extremely important, and along with that, a partnership with producers, ranchers, and farmers that has been and needs to be modified to include much smaller acreage, much more diversity, much more variety, much more interchange, like you said, you know. And I think we're going to get there faster because we have to, you know. And so if you're dealing with these problems and you're right on top of them and you somehow can stay there, I think you're going to be called up to be a lead in the next generation. I really do. Yes, I'm 79, so.
Well, one thing that I like to just add, and I know we're closing down here, is I do think we're looking at a vertically integrated model, but I really, as you well know, believe in the cooperative model. And I think we need to be exploring not only what is the producer cooperative, but what is the worker cooperative in the meat processing facility. You know, and how you really build that model, whether it's a family based, like, you know, Kalispell Creamery has a really family based vertical model in their dairy into their value added products. What does it look like in a cooperative model in that same scenario, that there is that ownership and commitment and investment all the way along the chain? And, you know, to me, I think we just need to really start looking at different business models, and instead of just, you know, the status, you know, quo. And I think cooperatives have a unique role here and could be something that could be explored. And I know that's what Walter's really committed to, but I think we need to go deeper than what he just sees, is my opinion.
So Janet, as we speak, I've got a set of bylaws up on my other screen for a new co-op that would be owned by workers and ranchers.
Mhm.
And hopefully will be finalized by the end of the month. And hopefully we'll be able to submit our letter of intent and have an actual structure by mid-January to early February. And it's trying to incorporate aspects of a model that, you know, the problem has been basically that if you take any given individual ranch, and also just the returns on investment that this whole thing promises to investors, there's not enough gravy, there's not enough margin to justify investors taking a risk that pays big salaries, that pay the talented team to win the hearts of the direct customers. And so one way to circumvent that is to allow the worker members to basically buy in with their own sweat equity. And, you know, they're not going to have a full-time salary right out of the gate, but they'll also be owners, and they'll have an equal say in the governance, and they'll have patronage long-term. So not only will they potentially have a job, but they'll have, you know, a benefit in the business based on their patronage of either labor in the case of the workers, or, you know, patronage in terms of how much produce they're running through the co-op in terms of the producers. So I really agree with you. And yeah, I don't know exactly where our little venture is going to go, but I agree. And MCDC has been incredibly helpful. When we tried to form a co-op the first time back in 2012, actually it was 2014 when Montana Farmers Union, at that time it was Alan as the director, and Farmers Union Enterprises gave us a grant. We traveled to Minnesota to pitch to their board, and they were really generous in trying to help us form that. And this is just another run at it. And I got a question in the chat about the book. It's it's The New Livestock Farmer, and it's Rebecca Thistlethwaite and her husband, Jim Dunlop. And this is what it's not as dog-eared as I'd like it to be. But I have spent a little bit of time in it. It's definitely helpful. It goes through the different species that they have experience with, and then it goes through in the second half of the book is more the marketing processing side. And anyway, they're using this as the text for the Western Meat School that is running as we speak. I think there's 3 or 4 weeks left in it. We meet once a week, Wednesday nights, for a couple hours. And
I could add that she is a laster who has gone bust at least a couple times, and, you know, just weathered the storms. When I first met her, I wouldn't have bet on her, you know, for a day. but her persistence and her can do it is just unbelievable, you know, over the years. So I think there are more young people that really need the gates open, you know, an opportunity. And us old geezers, some of us need to get the hell out of the way, you know, so that we can move to new ideas. We were all new ideas when we were your age, you know, and now it's time for you to have new ideas and try new things. So I'm behind it. When will you know? I mean, are you willing to let other people know about what you're doing so they can give you support, financial and otherwise?
Well, yeah, we haven't been very, public about it while we're still trying to form and get our heads around. But at the same time, it would be a shame to like not share it and ask for help, because we'll need it. And one of the major questions we have right now, we've built a customer membership functionality into the bylaws so making customers one of the member classes in the co-op is a possibility, and that we're still trying to iron out. And that's one major way to ask participation. Another major way that we've thought about and wondered about is pre-selling, essentially doing a Kickstarter, pre-selling carcasses, let's say for delivery in spring of 2022, where people could participate essentially as investors by pre-buying beef, and then their risk is that they don't get the beef if we don't work. And so we're trying to find different ways of how do we engage a Montana community that wants to see this work. And I think we are beginning to be willing to just share that we're trying to do it. But there's a lot of good people trying to do good things right now, and
Yeah,
it can only help to just have little conversations like this as much as possible. And
right.
And at some point pretty soon, if folks are interested in learning more about our little project, I'd love to share in whatever way it makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the time and for the discussion. Really appreciate. It's got to be an adventure, Arrow, to run a virtual annual meeting, but I appreciate what you do and all the work you go to.
Maybe
Thank you, Cole.
this is an experiment, when we're all done with 10 days of Arrow, maybe we're gonna discover something we didn't even know could happen. You got to be optimistic, right? Somewhere, got to have hope. I'll see you around. Take care.
Take care, Ken.
Yep. I'll just put my 2 cents in. I think one of the advantages is that it gives people more time to integrate information. And so, technology notwithstanding, I think we'll see. We'll see how it is after the end of 10 days. Erin, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Thanks, Cole. Thank you to everyone who came out for this today. I think that's it. Unless, Robin, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just really appreciate the conversation, the dialogue. I learned a lot tonight. Yeah, and I wish I had a magic wand. I don't, but anyways, I really appreciate the sharing and the information. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your night, and check out the Arrow website and sign up for other sessions if you're interested. Thank you.
Thanks,
Perfect.
everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.